Wherever you are, welcome. However you found this moment, I'm glad you did. I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Head, where perspective matters and clarity sets the tone. Let's get into it. What's in my head? So, first thing that's in my head, it's something kind of comical, really, if you think about it. And when I first came up with this part of this episode and what I was going to talk about, it's actually changed since I actually came up with it. But it's the quote unquote Trump phone and the delays and the MAGA grift that continues over and over and over again. But this promise versus the product, right? So this Trump phone, quote unquote Trump phone, was marketed aggressively to supporters with promises of American made, quick delivery, the best phone ever, um, you go the usual talking points that come out of his mouth, right? And his people's mouth, the MAGA mouth, right? Everything's the greatest ever, the worst ever, or it's all the over dramatization, dramatic, trying to be the best or the worst ever, right? It's no one's ever been scrutinized like this before, or no one's ever produced something as great as this before. It's always these grandiose statements that people actually believe. One of the things I find most frustrating about this whole MAGA cult thing and this time period that we're in is that people can say things in grandiose fashion that either are incredibly difficult to prove, i.e., validate, or just aren't feasible, aren't fathomable, aren't possible, right? We can say these things and people believe it because A, they're too lazy to do the research, they're too invested in the cult, or they just that's the person that they want to believe, and that's who they're going to believe, regardless of what comes out, i.e., Epstein, child, you know, sex trafficking, all that stuff. But months later, probably a year almost at this point, delays and even changing fine print in the shadow of the night, right? It went from whatever the fine print was originally to you may not even get a product, and there's no guarantee you're going to get a product written into the fine print. But it's left many people wondering what exactly they paid for. Now, whether they'll admit it or not is a different thing. Because again, when you're locked into this window in this place where your support, not to be using the word trumps reality and facts and logic and reason, self respect, and go on and on and on, it's hard to come off that box, right? It's hard to come off that spot. I mean, it's not really hard, it's just they don't want to. But changing the rules midstream is just crazy work to me. And I don't mean to use that slang term, but crazy work is like the new thing, right? But one of the biggest concerns is this updated fine print, um, reportedly that states that customers may not even receive a physical device. Now, what's changed since I actually did the little research and background check on all this stuff is that suddenly there's a new phone that's coming out miraculously, a China-made phone, which is just about as ironic as it gets, considering there was a China presidential delegation visit to China, and all the talk went out the window. I mean, literally, this man, the Chinese prime minister or president, I forget what his official title is, but he put Trump in a smaller chair, told him to his face that the U.S. is declining, just put him around a bunch of children coming off the plane. I mean, there was so much stuff that was done, and suddenly the dog's bark just went away, right? All bark before Trump got there. China's the worst. We got to stop China this, and we're going to be better than China and China. And suddenly we're thinking about letting China invest trillions into the U.S. and all this other. We're begging them to help us out with the Middle East war that was started by Trump. And it's picture perfect for what's the norm with this administration and this person, right? It's whatever gets me the most money or gets me the most power, I'll say. And then whether I actually follow through on it or not is completely different. And so you look at the loyalty that's built up with MAGA. It's this ecosystem, this echo chamber of loyalty where loyalty itself is monetized. Literally millions of dollars collected by people who have not seen a device in their hand yet. And the device that they're going to get, my personal opinion, don't know the facts of it, but my personal opinion, the device you're going to get is only coming about because there's this growing rumbling of people wondering where the hell is my phone for the money I paid. And to avoid a lawsuit, just through some out of generation mobile phone that if you just look online at the people who've done reviews or worked in retail and mobile companies, T-Mobile being the I believe the mobile carrier that distribute these phones, for $0 you could get them. And they're not even the current generation of the phone. It's an old phone. So what exactly are you getting? I mean, it just makes you might as well just go back to flip phones. It makes no sense. But it's sneakers, it's Bibles, it's NFTs, now it's phones, and supporters just keep feeding this machine of grift. I mean, it's the greatest grift I've ever experienced and seen in my life. I'm sure your lives, I'm sure your parents' lives, maybe even your parents' lives. I mean, this continuous grift to enrich a family and those that support it blindly, vehemently support this, are happy to support this. I mean, there's video after video after video posted online, and most of them are trying to make fun of MAGA, which I think at this point we've got to move on from the comedic aspects of this to simply just feeling bad for people allowing their lives to be governed and managed and grifted this much and being 110% complicit in it. I mean, we've got it. Yes, it's comical that some of these people are just ridiculously misinformed, disinformed, or flat out ignorant. Yes, there's a comedic part to that, but at some point you got to feel bad for people who just continue to vote against their own self-interest, contribute money to their own demise. Just eh, at some point, you have that family member who, no matter what you do, they put themselves in positions of either harming someone close to them or self-harm, whether it's picking the wrong fights or committing crimes or whatever. There's a term for that, black sheep of the family, right? Quote unquote, black sheep of the family. It's the person who, gets into trouble, who's different sibling than the other siblings, who got college degrees and great families and great jobs and make the right decisions. And at some point, you kind of just cast them aside. They're going to be who they're going to be. And that's what it's going to be, right? At some point, you just kind of cast them aside. And I'm not saying we should cast aside the MAGA cult. I think there's a redeeming quality in that some of the things that they actually want, we share, right? We want liberty. We want smaller government for the most part. We don't want government taking $900 trillion or whatever it is to close a strait that was opening and fighting to close it again. We want government to not be overwhelming in our lives. They're redeeming. We want the Second Amendment. We want the First Amendment. We want the Fourth Amendment to be honored and respected. We want all these things that I think we have a shared common ground on. But then there's this undertone, other side of things, right? There's the DEI attacks, the racial attacks, the immigrant attacks, the women attacks, the attacks on women. I should better phrase, but all these things you can't get on board with. It's my body, my choice for you, right? When you want to marry off a 16-year-old girl or 14-year-old girl or whatever in some states in this country, or you want to slap on the wrist people who literally scam and con people for millions of dollars, and instead of them facing the repercussions of their actions, you pardon them, right? We want people held accountable on the same level that we will be, right? Just imagine, and we haven't even touched on really insider trading that's blatantly happening, that's enriching certain, and we're talking about congressmen, we're talking about people associated with the Trump administration, we're talking about people who just are in the circle of knowledge. There's more and more people analyzing the data And I'd be willing to put money on that. We're going to look up a year or two from now, and maybe it might take till the next administration and a whole different Department of Justice that actually prosecutes criminals. And we're going to see that there's a whole bunch of people benefiting from information they're getting about things that are coming. And they know they've done the work, they've done analysis, they've done the studying to see that if this thing happens, A, then probably the market's going to do B. And so if I get ahead of that to either short a stock or buy a stock, I'll position myself where I can make 6, 7, 8 figures off one decision from one administration that I've been told about before anybody else knows. Literally the definition of insider trading. And we're going to find out that that's something that's been happening. I almost guarantee it. I can't predict the future, but I would put money on that one. You say always bet on black roulette. I'd probably bet on that one. But at some point, is there a scam fatigue, right? Are we kind of on the crux, the precipice of seeing scam fatigue happening, right? Because people have to ask themselves time after time after time, I've contributed all this money, I've been given all these promises. And when I weigh the promises with what's actually happening, they're not the same, right? It's just not happening the way it's promised to me. These things don't materialize as advertised, right? And at some point, people are going to have to decide whether accountability is just some word in a dictionary or something that actually has meaning, right? And regardless of political affiliation, regardless of politics should be the least concern for people. Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green, Libertarian, whatever, right? We had this conversation a couple episodes ago. There's really only two parties, Democrats, Republicans, right? The other parties, and even as someone a lifelong independent, we aren't really in the grand scheme of things in the big scope of those two parties. We're not even remotely close. The influence we have is non-existent, just like Green, Libertarian, et cetera, et cetera. And so at some point, we're going to have to decide whether accountability is the thing that should happen. And not just because now a Democrat's in the presidency, or not just because Republicans in the presidency, but because a government of the people, for the people, by the people should hold everyone equally accountable for the actions that they have. And until we get there, we really don't have hope with this being a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But it's a big grift, right? It's the branding grift. It's about the name and lights and on buildings and golf courses and all this stuff. It's the ballroom that's not needed at the White House. That's what this is all about. The ballroom that's not needed at the White House. But this is why these things happen, right? This is exactly why these things happen. Why the ballroom goes from it's going to be privately funded to not really. Can we have 900 billion or whatever the ask is on the budget? It's all about like the golden statue thing that was unveiled in Florida. For some reason, people have gotten to the point where the orbit of a celebrity is not enough. And in the case of Trump, the orbit of it. So, you go to a club and you see a celeb in a VIP section in the corner. You might want to go to the table that's closest to them in case, they decide to start giving away free bottles or something like that. There used to be an orbit thing back in the day where you didn't really have to know the celebrity. You didn't really have to associate or be a part of what's going on with the celebrity, but just being in the orbit of them, that 2 or 3 degree separation thing was enough. Now it's simply a branding thing, right? And by branding, it's the brand that you put out there for the other person, right? So you can't say nothing negative about Trump because he'll come after you and attack you. And now he's got a whole plethora of people blindly supporting him who will make sure whatever he says, the repercussions for not glowingly reviewing him or stating words about him, whatever the repercussions for doing that are, they will help you do that. And so there's, I think Thomas Massey, I think is his name. I think that's the New Orleans guy. I don't know if he's from New Orleans or not, but he's a congressman that's basically been primary. And I believe he voted against Trump. And I could have the name wrong, but it just happened recently. He voted against Trump for impeachment. And so it basically became, was it persona non grata, I think is a term or something like that. Ixnay to the Trump A, whatever you want to call it. He became a bullseye target for Trump. And so, as typical, he lost the primary. I think it was yesterday or last week or something like that. And of course, Trump goes to quote unquote True Social and does his little monologue, rambling thing. Um, and his supporters go, "Yay, yes!" It's just if you don't kiss the ring, then you're on the enemy list, right? For those who I consider, and I'm not going to say no disrespect because that'd be inappropriate or inaccurate, I should say. But those who kiss the ass and kiss the ring, that's what they have to do. Look at the African American guy, I think from Carolina. I think he's from. He was staunch supporter of Trump and basically was trying to be in the orbit, right? Trying to be in orbit, trying to get his political career started and ramped up. And Trump endorsed somebody else, right? It was three of them running. And then two of the guys, or one of the guys dropped off, immediately supported the other guy. Trump immediately supported the other guy. And then he's standing at a press conference looking stupid because you didn't have this guy at Trump's back for years now. And when push came to shove, he cast you aside. About brand. If you don't kiss the ring in the right way, if you don't polish it, spit, shine it, all that stuff, then you're just the guy on the outside or gal on the outside. And that's kind of what it is, right? You got to buy in. You got to put your chips on the table and push him Trump's way. If you're not helping his bottom line, then he has nothing for you. And unfortunately, he's got a whole MAGA base that, regardless of the reason why, the legitimacy of that reason, the truth and facts of that reason, all that stuff, they'll just support him anyway. Doesn't make sense, but that's the world we're in. Until that ends, we're stuck in this combination comedic existence where every day almost it seems like we can't believe how laughable some of this stuff is. And this feels sorry for not only the people who subscribe to this and get grifted by this and exist in this world of factless, um, data point, factless talking point, just nonsensical talking point. Look at the guy Jennings on CNN. I think his name is last name. I think it's Chris Jennings or something like that. And the sausage making crap that he spits out of his mouth to justify his positions. But that's what it is, right? Make America great again. No, it's make America grift again. And he's top grifter. The Color Between the Lines is a storytelling platform that blends journalism, history, and real life narratives to highlight voices and stories that are often overlooked or erased. Through interviews, short documentaries, and teaching segments, the channel focuses on using storytelling as a tool for connection, education, and impact, particularly around Black history, advocacy, and lived experiences. Check out The Color Between the Lines on the Alive Podcast Network, YouTube, and Apple. The second thing that's on my mind, I'm sure by now you heard of someone named Cheyenne Bryant, or Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, depending on your way of presenting this topic. On her website, she is described as, quote, Dr. Cheyenne Bryant is a psychology expert, renowned life coach, and co-producer of MTV's nominated Best Unscripted Reality Show, Teen Mom Family Reunion. Now, the reason this is even a topic is because there's been a lot of controversy lately about the accolades or qualifications of one Cheyenne Bryant. She claims that she's a doctor. There are others who are saying, doctor of what? How are you a doctor? To me, I don't understand why this topic is a thing, to tell you the truth. If you've done something, earned a degree, certificate, a title, proving it usually takes seconds, right? You have your diploma, you have your certificate. If it's technical, you have a certificate ID, right? You have very, very verifiable things that you can present at will to say, hey, I did this or I am that. It just doesn't make sense to me why this is being given so much fuel. The public skepticism of all this has just exploded. And I think it's because when someone works so hard to avoid proof, to avoid proving who they are, what they've done, what they've accomplished. It just makes it more unbelievable, right? I don't understand why it should be so difficult to prove that you are a doctor, right? I have a bachelor's degree. Now I have my diplomas and all that stuff. But if I didn't, I could get information about my collegiate studies, i.e., a transcript, and prove that I graduated from where I graduated. It just now just caveat this a little bit, just to give a little grace, a tiny bit of grace. The school apparently where she got her doctorate from, I guess, is no longer around. However, there are technical and archival. I don't know if that's a word, but we're going to go with it. Archival processes in place to maintain the type of things that a doctorate would have a path on, right? A trail of crumbs, information, your dissertation, your actual doctorate, like those things are still around. And so she makes a claim that even the archives are destroyed, which, it's kind of one of those things where when you keep asking a kid about a situation and every time they say something, you ask them, okay, so where's it at? Well, I dropped it down the drain, or I tore it up, or it's in the shredder. It's like the dog ate my homework type of thing, right? Except you're making a claim in public, literally on your website, Dr. Cheyenne Bryant. Now, this trust me culture, right? Modern culture increasingly rewards confidence over verification. I say that again. Modern culture increasingly rewards confidence over verification. You can be a great presence and presenter and not have the qualifications to back the things you're talking about. You can be a horrible presenter. You can be a nervous Nelly in public when you're speaking, but know exactly what the hell you're talking about because you have the qualifications, you've done the studies, certifications, diploma, doctorate, all that stuff. But you are just not a great public speaker. You're not a great communicator of your skill set, background, et cetera, et cetera. And so too often people are encouraged, enticed, manipulated into simply trusting personalities instead of asking for receipts. But it's the same kind of situation we're in with, and not to step back to MAGA for a second, but it's the same type of problem we have, right? We're trusting personalities as a MAGA quote unquote cult. We're trusting personalities over receipts. Someone can say they're the greatest something ever, or this is the worst thing ever, and no one asks for receipts. And when they do ask for receipts, in both cases, MAGA and Miss Bryant, Dr. Bryant, I'll give her the respect of calling her doctor if she wants to be called doctor. But when people do ask for receipts, there's vitriol, right? There's vitriol and rage and rebuke and discuss, how can you ask me for that type of stuff, right? And so when you think about this situation with perception, public opinion, public figures, and the quote unquote accountability, there's that word again. When people build brands of brown expertise, credibility should matter, right? Because you're building a brand. This is who you are publicly, and you are initiating this perception of you. Because that's what a brand is. You're putting it out there. This is what I'm about. These are my accomplishments. This is who I am. This is what I can do for you. This is my expertise. These are my qualifications, right? But public trust shouldn't be immune to just simple verification. If tomorrow, let me tell you something. If 2 weeks from now I decided to put doctor in front of my name, right? Now I'm pretty active on social media. I haven't posted a single damn thing about a dissertation. I haven't posted a single picture of me walking with a cap and gown, anything. If I put doctor in front of my name in 2 weeks, how much credibility would I have? Simple verification could not be provided, right? And I'm on the lowest of the totem pole, right? Shorting myself, who knows? Overstating, who knows? But the ask would be stronger for me as far as prove your doctorate, verify where's the proof of this accomplishment than it would be for Dr. Bryant, than it always is for Donald Trump, right? What's the common denominator there? Money, power, right? Perceived money and power, right? And, parallel this to, and I know I keep invoking Trump, and I try not to do that so much on this podcast, but, parallel that to when the campaign was going on, the first campaign, and just simple verification of tax disclosures, right? A norm that spans many, many presidential campaigns. You disclose your tax statements. You disclose the place you are financially. And there's many reasons behind that, right? We won't get into the details, but one of the big ones is make sure there's no influence that could harm the country if you're elected president. Ding, ding, ding. But you create a environment where questioning legitimacy becomes framed as this problem instead of the lack of transparency itself being the problem, right? Because think about that. Asking Trump for his tax returns, besides him saying, well, I'm under audit, so I can't, which was, we all knew that was BS from the very first time we heard it. But then it became this attack thing. Well, why are you asking for my tax return? What difference does it make? Right? Same thing with Dr. Bryant, quote unquote, Dr. Bryant. Now there's this backlash coming from that direction. And I love the line, I think it's something to the effect of, I only Jesus proof or something to that effect. But I remember when I first heard it the first time, whatever the saying response from her was, I laughed because I'm like, how did we invoke religion into this? Like, how did religion become a part of this conversation? But and listen, not to directly compare Trump and Dr. Bryant, but that response is very Trumpian, right? You deflect, distract, and then you demean, right? If those things don't work, I think we're somewhere between the distraction and demean phase when it comes to Dr. Bryant, right? Deflecting was first, the school and couldn't do this and couldn't do that. Distract is, I owed it to God only or Jesus only, whatever the saying was. And demean comes next, where she'll start attacking people, especially now, I think that's already started to tell you the truth, but she'll attack people who are public figures that come out and speak about her, right? That's probably the next thing. But the bigger lesson, this isn't one person or one title. It's a broader social issue where image and influence often overpower facts and accountability, right? It's the hero worshiping. It's the idol worshiping. It's the, I see success in someone and either I want to get there or I don't have the ability to get there. So I want to live vicariously through them. And so anyone that comes and challenges their credibility, attacks them in any way, tells them they're wrong in any facet of their life, I feel compelled to defend them because I'm bought in hook, line, and sinker to not only who they are as a person, the accomplishments they've made as a person, but anything they need, I got them, despite the fact that I'll never actually meet them in life, right? And that's what a cult is. That's what we have in this country right now. We have people blindly following, blindly supporting. And again, go look at the videos and a lot of them are spoofs that are not spoofs, they're comedic things that reporters are doing, going out and interviewing people. And I saw one the other day where a guy was asked, I think he was from Virginia, about redistricting, excuse me. And he pivoted somehow to, what was it called? CRT. I think it's CRT. Yeah. And that he was totally against it and all that stuff. And then the guy just said, well, what is it? He said, I'm not going to get into all that, but you're against it. Yes. So what part about it don't you like? Just give me one thing you don't like. Oh, I don't want to get into details about it. I'm not really up to snuff on the details of it, but I know I don't like it. Okay. So you're not against it because you're informed about it. You understand what it means, what's actually being taught. You're against it because someone told you you should be against it. and you listen. Again, it's image and influence overpowering facts and accountability. The lack of accountability bleeds into the supporters because they don't have to be accountable, they don't have to be accountable to their opinions and support them with facts and logic and reason and all the things we talked about before. They just need to believe it, and you can't talk them off that box. You can't talk them off that point. They don't have to justify it. It's their opinion that they're portraying as facts, and that's what it is. And anyone who's against that or pushes back against that, you're just woke out there. That's where we are right now. And Dr. Bryant's like a little microcosm of the Trump MAGA effect, but it's kind of the same thing. Like I said, distract, right? Deflect, demean. Thing is deflect, distract, demean, but same thing. 3Ds. It's the MAGA formula. And until we get this facts and accountability back into the primary way of thinking, we're kind of stuck here. I don't want to be stuck here. So I'm going to keep pushing facts and accountability. But that's what's in my head. Want more clarity, perspective, and real conversation? Tune in to Dave's Head Podcast. Every episode delivers insight, conversation, and stories that make you think, and maybe even smile a little. Whether YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the Alive Podcast Network, or your preferred source, subscribe, follow, tune in, and share with anyone who needs to hear it. Don't you miss a single episode. Your next great conversation starts in Dave's Head. So hip hop has always been more than just music. It's been expression, innovation, survival, storytelling, resistance, entrepreneurship, and community. But for many people outside of the culture, they only see a narrow version of what hip hop actually is. Today's guest has spent a number of years challenging those assumptions and highlighting the ways hip hop culture can inspire solutions across education, health, leadership, social justice, and innovation. Manny Faces is an award-winning journalist, speaker, cultural strategist, and creator of a Hip Hop Can Save America, where he explores how hip hop culture can improve society and uplift humanity. Manny uses journalism, storytelling, and cultural analysis to highlight how hip hop culture can inspire innovation, collaboration, leadership, and social progress across multiple industries and communities. I'm happy to welcome Manny to Dave's Head. Manny, how's it going?
Dave, it's a pleasure to be here, man. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. All the thank yous, I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. We had an interesting conversation before. I like to leak in some of the stuff from B-roll in my episodes because it's kind of comical sometimes. But we talked about you're like the number 2, the last 3 Knicks fans. I mean, if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube or anywhere, you clearly see the Knicks logo in the middle of his hat.
Yep.
I guess welcome again, Knicks fans. I can't get rid of you now.
Let's go. We'll take even the bandwagon fans. We'll take them all. Let's go. Come on in. Come on in.
Hey,
it's been a long time
everybody pays
coming.
a toll, right? Yeah. I mean, it's been a while. I mean, back to Patrick missing that little ducky, that dummy shot he missed.
Yeah. We don't have to really revisit that though.
Get into that. No, I was going to say, one of my favorite, and all the 30-30s are pretty much good. There's very few 30 for 30s that I just don't like, but the one of the Knicks and that series and the behind the scenes where Patrick was in his head saying Stark's better, and I say nothing.
Yeah.
Say nothing. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But before we get into hip hop, I know I gave a small intro for you, but I'd like to do it on my guests. If you could take a moment, tell the people who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, I go by Manny Faces. I'm essentially a journalist, but something of an advocate journalist or a solutions journalist or media creator. The crux of what I cover, amplify, document, advocate for is, as you mentioned, hip hop. But much more focused on the entirety of the culture, first of all, and particularly how it's being used in inventive, surprising, and sometimes unexpected ways across different disciplines outside of entertainment. So, like you mentioned, education, healthcare, science and technology, the fine arts, politics, and social justice, these intersections where hip hop has found its way into these institutional spaces or into these spaces that it either maybe once was, then hadn't been for a while, but now is back in, or has just made some really innovative advances that are, generally speaking, the stuff I like to amplify, helping people or helping uplift livelihoods, and communities. I do that through podcasts myself, live stream on YouTube more recently, sort of an expansion of that, and Substack newsletter. And I wrote a book, which is
Okay.
behind me, called Hip Hop Can Save America: Inspiration for the Nation from a Culture of Innovation, which is a collection of a lot of those interviews and a lot of these kind of foundational arguments that I'm making. And the book was endorsed by some guy named Cornel West. I don't know if anyone knows him.
Okay.
So it's a little something. But
Yeah.
that's
He's been around.
yeah,
Yeah, we
I
heard
know.
of him.
Figured you might. But yeah, so packaged together, that's the lanes that I move in, and sort of the mission, the North Star of what I talk about all the time.
Now, knowing that we were going to talk about hip hop, I got my DMX shirt on, which I'll raise it up a little bit. Rest in peace,
Yes,
DMX.
indeed. Yes, indeed.
But to be a little transparent,
Yep.
the late '80s and '90s, early '90s, I was big into hip hop, R&B, rap. I went to college in '95, so gangster rap, East versus West, all that stuff was pretty prevalent. I got a little older, then adult life started, and I started flowing more into the R&B, the jazz, and all that. So it's kind of the spectrum in the area where I live right now. Those who know me in my fraternity, my line name is literally Rhythm and Blues.
Okay.
But I say all that to say there are people that come in and out of hip hop all the time, right? Whether it's the culture, the music, using it for profit, whatever. But what do most people, or what do you hear the most, is misunderstood about the hip hop culture?
Right. I mean, right there, I think the culture part, the fact that I think what we've gotten to a place now, certainly outside of the culture, or let's just say outside of, the whatever lifestyle ecosystem that you feel yourself a part of when it comes to rap, hip hop, music, the culture, any of the elements, whatever your connection is. Those who don't have that connection by far have defaulted to music when hip hop is said, right? When someone says hip hop, it's just rap music to them, and very often bad rap music or radio rap music, and that's literally the only part of the iceberg that they see. In your intro, you started off and you said, your very first sentence was hip hop has never been, just music. Now, we named the genre the same thing that the culture's named, so I get it can be, it's very synonymous and gets confused. But certainly the greatest misunderstanding is that hip hop, the genre, is a subset of hip hop, the culture, and that there's
Mhm.
a vast, again, iceberg of social, cultural, life existence
Mhm.
that goes
Yeah.
past the music. Now, then we also have folks that are, of a certain age as we are, and may have been attached to the culture at one time because
Mhm.
of the way
Yeah.
the world goes and the way I think the culture has been over
Mumble
commodified.
rap.
Yeah, sure. Commodified, simplified, on a through the avenues that mass media
Mhm.
is distributed. Folks get jaded, and they think that the misunderstanding there is that what once was is no longer. And I think that those are the two battlegrounds that I do, and folks like me do. The third one would be that hip hop, musically or not, can do nothing really to benefit humanity, or what I mean. It's If it's
Mhm.
fun, it's entertainment, it's even they do break in the Olympics, that's cool, but it's not really doing anything. It's not a big force for good, and that's the one I push back and love to argue about the most. All three of those things I think are certainly true to some degree, but definitely not um, understood or heard about enough to give people the impression that there's so much
To be gained.
goodness in this,
Yeah.
in the music, the culture, the people surrounding it, the ethos. All of that still
Mhm.
exists very much. Not only here in America, but throughout the world. And it's just a vast uh, landscape that isn't being picked up on.
So a couple things. First, I'm gonna start by saying yes, I'm gonna get comments, especially this clip becomes one of the clips I put out. I did date myself by saying mumble rap. It's cool. I accept that I'm older. It
Yeah,
is what it is at
I
this
get it.
point. You know,
I
the
get it.
grays here say what they say.
Hey, I'm with you. Like I
I,
said, I'm with you too. You know, it's not necessarily the
yeah.
type of music that I don't like necessarily where that aspect of the music has gone. But I got Spotify, I got Bandcamp. I could find lyrical spiritual mirrors from rappers every day, all day. Whatever
Hmm.
I'm looking for. If I still want some boom bap, I can find it. If I still want something esoteric, if I want something conscious or saying something substantive or fighting the power types, I can get all that. So yes,
Hmm.
I don't like it's not my thing and it's not some of our things. Um, but I don't know that it's supposed to be, and I'm okay with that with some caveats. But go ahead.
Yeah, and you know what? Musical taste changes over time, right? It depends what's going on in a person's life. It depends what message they're receiving, all that stuff. I know when I was growing up, music and especially hip hop was a way for us to just be on the corner and not doing something bad.
Yeah,
I mean, I remember us,
yeah,
battle rapping on the corner,
that's right.
singing R&B on the corner, just listening to music on the corner, and cops rolling by and like, huh, they're just kind of chilling on the corner,
That's it.
as opposed to they're selling drugs or
That's
they're
right.
gangbanging or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and so just those, and then granted, we have the movies that came out in the '90s, right? And that's another part of the hip hop culture, right? I'm trying to remember the name of the movie now. Ricky gets shot, and I can't remember the name of it right now.
Boys in the Hood.
Boys in the Hood,
Yep. Yep.
right? And then Above the Rim.
Sure.
You got all these different movies that came out. Uh, so thinking about that, and my question was actually going to be before I even started talking about movies was about hip hop being appreciated more abroad
Mm,
than here in the United States, and
yeah.
your thoughts around that. And we'll come back to the movie thing.
Yeah, for sure. That's absolutely true. I've been lucky enough. Hip hop's brought me to a couple places, which is really dope. For a great many years, I ran an online magazine called Birthplace Magazine. It's where I started kind of being my own self-appointed music journalist, and I was covering the New York
Hmm.
area hip hop scene. That was my beat, right? So 5 boroughs, a little bit. I'm from Long Island, so Strong Island all day. A little bit of Jersey and Connecticut, and somehow I finagled myself to be able to cover a big hip hop festival in Lyon, France, right? And they had been doing this for 10 years. This was now 10 plus years ago. And so I was able to see this giant 4-day festival in France, right? And all the elements were represented, the breaking battles, they had graffiti, they had giant train replicas in the courtyard. And this is like these buildings are 600 years old. I'm in the courtyard.
Yeah.
There's like a balcony of what used to be the governor's mansion, and DJ Babu from the Beat Junkies is spinning on top of this like 800-year-old building. And so to me, I'm fish out of. It was my first time in Europe, and it's wild to see all this. The underground artists are performing, the stars are performing. I was there with Sky Zoo. Sky Zoo was performing. They loved Sky Zoo, and he's an underground
Hmm.
rapper from New York. So you hear this all the time from especially some of the older artists who then tour the world, and they're like, no, we get so much reception over there. Two things. Number one, United States is just overcapitalized, and so everything's gonna lowest common denominator, and you can still find these artists performing and touring and such, but they're far and few in between, and it's just harder to kind of be front of mind for us older folks who have jobs, and we don't have the disposable time to be paying attention to when is Das Effects coming to my town. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wouldn't know, and
Yeah.
I'm into this. So the complexities of how the United States works, what I did see and kind of picked up from the European side is that they're just older societies, right? And art is very important to them. And so this was Easter Monday. Everything was closed on Easter Monday, which is another European thing. I discovered that it was a thing. So everything's closed, but the bars and everything is open. And you're in this courtyard surrounded by these bars. And there's people, just the Lyonnais, the locals, just sipping their beer in those weird shaped glasses and they're there. And they're not hip hop heads. They're just there. They're out. This is what they do. They sit in the courtyard and drink beer in their cafes. And they were watching intently all of the hip hop that was going on. They weren't bopping their heads. They weren't like into
Hmm.
it, but they were watching it with like a respectful gaze. Right. And I just
Hmm.
think that there's something about older societies that they look at art as a part of their life a lot more, the history of art, the importance of art. And it's like such a part. I mean, these buildings all have like carvings on them. You know what I mean? Everything's old and valued overseas. And I think that just translates to they respect, you know, art. And if they like hip hop, they're going to respect the pioneers. They're going to, they're going to love the fact that I went to Groningen, which is in the Netherlands. They had a whole museum for their local hip hop history for like since the 70s. They've had hip hop there, and so they love it and they cherish it. And it's just a little bit less where they they don't lead with commerce. They lead with culture.
Mm,
I'm
yeah.
sure there's over people making money, and there's people emulating trap music because that's the style of whatever, and they're just trying to make money in France and all these other countries as well. But I don't think they lead with commerce. I do think they lead with culture, and I think that that's why you'll find pockets over there that are going to be more respectful to the genre as a whole, and particularly like the elder statesfolk, that come over and tour the world. That's my take.
Yeah, and this is going to be a loaded follow up, but it sounds like internationally they connect with the hip hop culture. Like you said, it's not commercial. They
Yeah.
respect it. They celebrate it.
Yeah.
Where stateside, um, it's about the commercial side, right? It's about how much money I can make. It's a capitalistic side. Why do you think the capitalism wins in the U.S. versus? And we're not even talking about the message yet, right? We're talking
Right. Right.
about just celebrations and museums, but the actual messaging.
Yeah. Sure.
Why do you think capitalism supersedes messaging over here in the
We're
U.S.?
really good at capitalism here, man. We're the number one.
Yeah,
We're the number one
yeah.
at ruining culture by capitalism. So I often say, look, first of all, obviously, long history of America, taking black music and re changing it and flipping it and kind of capitalizing, co-opting it and making money off of it, right?
Hmm.
And not paying the originators, not paying the creators, et cetera, et cetera. So that's always going to happen. I think that part of that then equals whatever happens with most of media, which is, feed the lowest common denominator at this point. I mean, I make the analogy a lot of times, like, why do we see so many superhero movies? But we don't see that's what's in the movie theaters, the big blockbuster
Hmm.
hits, the things that most people are going to kind of gravitate to, the most audacious and rambunctious stuff. But
Explosions, got
yeah,
shotguns.
right, which
Yeah.
is kind of like how the music feels sometimes, the most, angst inducing, the most, and look, we had a lot of it too. Don't forget, Mobb Deep's gunshots used to make us levitate. Like
Hmm.
we had those moments too. So what
Yeah.
happens is like the lowest common denominator is, well, this is where it's all going to kind of funnel into. There's still art house films being made. There's still documentaries being made,
Hmm.
just like there's all this other music being made and all these other, as I say, applications of hip hop outside of
Yeah.
music, that are happening all over the place, doing, in all spectrums. But that's not what's going to be um, pushed because it's the least common denominator. It's what will make the most money with the least amount of, you know, expense, right? That's capitalism, right? And you don't have to do artist development if all the artists sound the same. You don't have to do, big marketing campaigns if the media is consolidated and, you could do one campaign to do all this. You don't have to do marketing if they get famous off TikTok and they're already famous by the time you sign them. So they're saying, well, we keep doing this. This is how we make our money.
Rinse, repeat, rinse,
Rinse,
repeat.
repeat. And people say, oh, there used to be a balance. There used to be a balance. I'm like, yeah, but because they hadn't figured out how to fully co-opt it yet. Like they,
Hmm.
Most Def was making money too at the same time, you know, uh, whatever, Two Live Crew, not the same time, not same era, but there was this side and that
Hmm.
side at the same time until the industries and the powers that be said, oh, wait a minute, this makes a little bit more money and we could do it with less, you know, effort and less expense. And we don't have to hear someone like Mos Def's mouth. So let's just keep doing this. So, I think that's just the way it's gone. The problem with the idea of balance is that we're not, like, people will still fund art house films. People will
Hmm.
fund documentaries, even though they're not making millions in the blockbusters. Longer conversation, but I don't think that enough people will say, well, we're going to fund hip hop, the other type of music that it can make, and again, these other endeavors. Even the work I do, like, who's paying me to do it? Nobody, right? Why? Because we don't have, like, the only reason ballet still exists is because mostly rich white people decide that ballet should still exist, and they
Hmm.
contribute, and there's foundations and there's philanthropy that keeps that cultural piece alive. Otherwise, there wouldn't be ballet either. There wouldn't be operas because it's not enough people go to these things, but they're being funded and they're being kind of subsidized. And I don't see that happening around hip hop yet. And I think all of those things is why capitalism wins when it comes to the music and by extension, the culture.
Yeah, and shout out to ballet dancers. I don't know how the hell y'all do that thing with your foot
Man,
and stand
listen,
on it, your toes, and
I got my good
yeah,
friend of mine used to be a ballerina and now, of course, has spine problems. And
yeah,
like, so they do it, but I don't know if it's a good long term
yeah.
strategy.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say foot problems. You said
I
spine
think
problems.
too.
Jeez.
Yeah, everything problems. Yeah, neck and they do all kind of wild stuff. But yeah, like I say, there wouldn't be ballet. There wouldn't be some of these cultural, things happening if it wasn't for the rest of the society valuing them. And that's also the big battle of the work, that I do, and by extension amplifying the work that other people are doing. The people just don't know this exists. People don't know that hip hop's being used in schools and in mental health therapy settings, and that if you want better results from your education system, or if you want to counter what the education system's doing, and you want to work outside of the schools, fund this. These things
Mhm.
exist, but they're not gonna be lucrative on their own. So therein lies the challenge.
Yeah, you touched on Mos Def and movies, so I want to dive into that just a little bit. So you got Mos Def, Ice T, Ice Cube. Let me see who else. Ludacris. Let me see. LL Cool J.
Sure.
Some might say Will Smith's not a hip hop artist, but we're gonna say Will Smith too.
Ah, we give it to them.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So and all the other ones that I can't even name right now. Have they elevated the vision and the thought of hip hop by this crossover to movies and even, I mean, Law and Order with Ice T. I mean, come on,
Right.
he's on every damn day on TNT.
That's
But
for sure.
um,
Queen Latifah,
ha- Queen
as well. Yep,
Latifah,
yep,
yeah,
yep, yep. Um,
have they elevated hip hop through the crossover into acting and in movies?
I think so. I like to think so. I think that those of us who recognize them as hip hop first think so,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't know, like, Queen Latifah was an amazing rapper, and her discographer singer as well. Did a whole album. If you don't know that about her, then you don't think of her as hip hop, so you can't connect her to hip hop, right? So, but I guess most people in the zeitgeist, I'm just thinking aloud. It's a good question. Probably do attach these folks to hip hop. They might then fall into the category of, well, the old hip hop when it was good. So
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
they elevate hip hop? No, they kind of elevated themselves. They're elevating
Hmm.
their own stance as a hip hop artist that has gone on to do other things. And I make this argument in a talk that I do, kind of social justice hip hop oriented, right? Because I bring up Vic Mensa. So Vic Mensa, the rapper who now is known by making those videos where he plucked the orange off the tree and he's in front of, doing TikToks where he's peeling an
Hmm.
orange and dropping these incredibly brilliant socio-political analyses, right? Just brilliant guy, knows what's going on, drops these gems. He's humorous, he's charismatic, he's eating the orange. I don't know if he's gonna run out of oranges because he does this like every day. And I say, and he's a rapper and he used to rap about this stuff too. But there's a lot of people who don't know that he's a rapper. They just now discovered him through
Hmm.
TikTok. And people are like, yeah, no, I don't know. I just know him as the orange guy. I'm like, exactly. He's a rapper. He's done this thing for a while. But it doesn't make him any less hip hop. It doesn't make him not hip hop because he's not rapping, but he's talking to you. He's still presenting himself in a way that's kind of got a little bit of a flavor. It's got a little bit of flair. It's got his voice, his vernacular. He's still hip hop. He is hip hop. So he doesn't stop being hip hop when he changes the medium. So yes,
Hmm.
do I think that those wonderful actors that you've talked about have elevated hip hop? Absolutely. Just like I think the teachers who are using hip hop in the classroom have elevated hip hop. But if you don't know enough to make the connection, or if you like just kind of relegate them to the past, then I don't think that connection is clear enough. But Queen Latifah hasn't made an album in how long? Right, I was gonna say LL, but he just did. But Queen Latifah hasn't made an
Yeah.
album in how long? She's still hip hop. That she is hip hop, and she will tell you this. I'm not speaking for her. She will tell. I'm hip hop. I'm hip hop to the day I die. So if you think that she has elevated her art form and her stance and her brilliance into the world, then absolutely she's elevated hip hop. But people don't make that connection. They lose that connective tissue, I think.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention one. I've been sitting on the meth too, like with the Power series and on
Oh, for
acting as
sure.
well in movies. I
Joey
mean,
Badass
he
has gone into
yeah.
acting. Like it's rappers can be actors. Like there's a nice,
Mhm.
probably 50 more could be, 50. Speaking of something 50, but 50
Yeah.
more could if you're given that chance and that opportunity.
Mhm.
They're creatives, they're charismatic, they know how to do. And again, some of the younger artists not so much. They don't even perform very well because we're losing some of that artist and repertoire type stuff. But I can give you, probably 100 names of indie artists who are still doing as very much hip hop that would be great on stage and acting. And, Vic Mensa's now doing skits, so there's an example right there. So yes, I think, there's a lot of parallels to the skill sets. And I think it does elevate. I think it's brilliant because you're still doing hip hop. That's my point, is that you're still doing hip hop. You still are hip hop, even though you're not presenting it in typical hip hop fashion.
Yeah, I think Metro just put out a Cipher like a month or two ago, something like that.
Right.
So
Yeah, he'll pop up every
um,
now and then and
yeah.
not lose a step.
Well, he's definitely springboarding off his power success. I mean, he's like the Kevin Hart of just social media at this point. Like just everywhere, you see him everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna throw this whole conversation. I would have saved it for my first thought, but I figured it'd be too easy. But as you said, Long Islander or Strong Islander, I think you put it. Um, Biggie or Tupac,
um,
and why?
yeah, because I gotta qualify it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because any list, any thing is all subjective to taste, obviously. But it's also like I look
Mhm.
at it like, well, let me think of this. I think Tupac was a um he's more prolific, right? He's more prolific. I think, just put out so much more stuff. Obviously, had a little bit more of a political, social bent, toward him, later on. I think he was more of a, more of a, not more of, because now, okay, so more prolific than Biggie. Biggie was sort of in the lines of transformative. Right. So whenever I say my top five, it's Rakim. It's always Rakim. And, it's not Strong Island bias. But the thing about Rakim is that he was a transformational rap artist to me and to a
Mhm.
million other people. This is nothing. I'm not saying anything like, yeah, man, duh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it changed sort of how the genre was presented to the world. Right. And Pac did that. I think he did it over time. Right. There was a little bit of a longer
Mhm.
arc where he became this iconic figure that would go down in history. Biggie was
Mhm.
very quick about it. When you saw Biggie, it was something new, different, transformative, and it changed. No, it added a new element. Like if there was like a periodic table of rap, right? He
Mhm.
added his own element. I think Tupac combined a few and maybe through alchemy created something. You know what I mean? But Biggie was sort of
Mhm.
like a big bang of his own kind of thing. So for different reasons at different times. I can't pick one over the other.
Mhm.
It's the mood I'm in and whether I want to hear that alchemy or I want to hear that, that once in a lifetime, vibe.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I hate that question, but I love
Yeah.
asking it.
Yeah. I get it. I get it. Um,
Because I
I hope
listen to
the
both.
answer's
I
like,
gotta, I
I hope the answer's like
yeah.
insightful, but like that's how I look at all these things. Comparison and then so the why. I'm glad you asked the why. Some people be like, nah, no, don't, no caveats, no, don't. Like I
Hmm.
have to
Yeah.
explain.
Listen, we got
Yeah.
our reasons for what we do when we say what we think.
Yeah.
So there
How
we
is
go.
it on Drink Champs when they can't pick? I would have had a shot.
Yeah.
So you know.
So you talked about, and I lost my thought. Oh, storytelling.
Mm,
And talking about Tupac
yeah.
and social change, and you go back to the NWAs. We go back to Nas in some aspects. You talked about Most Def. Talk about the social aspect of hip hop. The influence is obvious, I think, but just in case you want to touch on that, but more so where it's at today and its impact on social change.
Uh, I think the biggest and you asked this earlier, like the biggest misconception or the lamentation, right? But people lament about the most is that hip hop doesn't do that anymore, right? And we saw a lot of that. Obviously, the message being, probably one of the probably ranked in top five list of greatest rap songs of all time, maybe even greatest songs of all time. Fight the Power, the seminal,
Mhm,
protest song, all the conscious raps, quote unquote, however you want to, label that during that golden era that was in front of everyone's face. And I'm talking about, obviously most Def, Yasin Bey and them, Poor Righteous Teachers, Brand Nubian, the Five Percenters,
mhm.
everyone
Black
bringing
Thought.
this knowledge out. And then again, because we don't see that anymore, young people don't see it because they're tuned into the channels that don't algorithmically push that. Older folk,
Mumble rap.
yeah, older folk, we don't get that. We just don't, we're not
Yeah.
in front of any channels. So we're not paying attention. We're not digging anymore. And honestly, anyone who's as our age and can't find rap they want to listen to, as I said earlier, it exists. It's on you. It's not on them. It's being made.
Mhm.
So dig for it like we used to do when we used to stay up to
Yeah.
the 10 o'clock on Friday and Saturday nights to with our cassette tape to tape off the radio because that was the only time rap came on. We did it then. We could do it now. But it's not out there. It's not prevalent, and I get it. I'm also, if you're looking for rap to be a vehicle for social informing the public, right? Because that's what some of that was also like, putting ideas out there, telling stories about people who were facing injustice and telling their own stories. If you're looking for rap to do that anymore, okay, maybe that's not being done as much. There are some people doing it for sure. Go find them. It's not just Kendrick Lamar, right? But I also make the point that I don't know that we spend a lot of time looking for that and wishing that we're still the case. I make the point that it doesn't matter as much anymore. I know. And the reason why I say it is because, we think of protest music, we think of, rap's job and doing that for a while, because it was in the tradition of like the 60s, right? The civil rights movement. You had artists like Marvin Gaye and Dylan and Stevie Wonder to some degree, right? Nina Simone. You had all these people that were like making these songs about the issues that were happening and telling the stories that weren't being told, because you only had 2 news stations, right? You had 2 news. If it wasn't Walter Cronkite wasn't telling you about it, Nina Simone had to. And if, that's how we learned about Hurricane through, Dylan, right? We wouldn't have known the story of Hurricane if it was. And we just don't need that anymore, because there's no shortage of people telling us about what's happening. You'll get both sides, left and right all day. But there's no shortage of like bringing attention to an issue. It's how we find that through the media landscape. So what I say is, a protest song, fine, great, sure, make them, right? Maybe it's performative. Maybe I don't want you to make a protest song just because you think you should. Like Jay-Z comes out with a protest song, I'm like, you don't do that. I don't want to hear it now. What are you doing? Like, why are you jumping in this lane? So I don't care as much. Only because I know all of the work being done. When I talk about hip hop and social justice, it's not protest music. It's being in the schools, right? It's Dr. Adia Winfrey, who was a hip hop psychologist and then went on to run for Congress in Alabama, Ruby Red, Alabama, lost, did pretty well, but lost, and then ran again and lost, close, but then started an organization called Transform Alabama. And what that's doing is that was helping fight against redistricting in Alabama some years ago. They had a lawsuit. It was just one of the coalitions that came together to actually fight against redistricting. They had concerts to bring awareness to the issue, right? It was still hip hop. Again, she's still hip hop, even though she's not like necessarily rapping, right? Brings the community out like only hip hop could do, brings people from different walks of life together for a cause. Hip hop, nothing does it better than hip hop, right? And use that hip hop sensibilities to fight against redistricting. To me, that's an infinite amount of times more effective than, a protest song, right? Which again is still being made. I'll make this last point. After Michael Brown was killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri, a bunch of years ago, it was like August of the year, I think it happened. And then in December, Questlove, and we love Questlove, right? No shade against Questlove, but put out an Instagram post that was very well, amplified and very popular at the time. And he was basically lamenting that there were no protest music about, and again, the big rash of police brutality, live and in living color, right, against Black folk in America. He's like, we got to have more Dylans and Nina Simones and Public Enemies, right? And he says, I don't mean every song needs to be Fight the Power, but just 1 or 2 songs, right, that would, speak to our times. And everyone's like, yeah, Questlove, yeah, that's right. We don't do that. We need more of that. The problem was that between August and December, I counted like 8 that had been made by actually well-known artists like Rick Ross and T.I. and Run the Jewels and Alicia Keys and Tink, who aren't hip-hop, but they're hip-hop adjacent, and De La Soul featuring Chuck D from the old Public Enemy. So we don't need new Public Enemies if you're not paying attention to the ones that already exist. So to me, the idea that protest music is like missing, no, it's there. It's not amplified, but it's there. It also doesn't necessarily be where I think the focus should be in what hip hop can do to uplift certainly the communities from whence it came, but across the board, just society in general. Sure, protest music, great, But the last thing I'll say is Kendrick Lamar made "We Gonna Be All Right," which became the anthem for the Black Lives Matter movement. But he made it 5 years before. It was come out in 2015, so it wasn't even made for the moment. So people are making the music. The movements will find them. They'll connect. Don't make protest music for the sake of saying you did it. But we waste a lot of energy wishing that that was where the action is. And I'm telling you, my whole book, my whole podcast, my whole everything is filled with examples of where it's actually making an impact. And I wish that, well, you know, my work, I would say what I want is really irrelevant, but my work is to amplify those angles because they are really effective and they're saving lives and improving communities, small scale, but less, you know, we can bubble that up and it'll do more than, you know, than those songs would ever do. They're not moving the needle. So anyway, that's my take on it.
No, and I appreciate that. And I think my follow up to that is, and what you want to see in your work that you're doing is the root of the problem twofold. One, we are desensitized to some extent to all the madness that's going on in this country and society. And then on the other side, we're oversaturated with the noise of everything else because of technology. We get blasted with hundreds of things a day. And so the algorithms, and I'm a technology guy, so you know, I'm a proponent and a critic of these algorithms. But
Yeah, I get it.
are we oversaturated with noise that distracts us from the things that we should be paying attention to?
Yes. It's part of the problem. Also, there are forces at work that are, you know, doing that on purpose. And
Actively,
yeah,
yeah.
100%. And I've studied some of this use of technology for political or, you know, malicious depending on what side you're on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, for means that will move, you know, people's opinions and etc. So yeah, I mean that is a huge problem. It's why it's impossible so far, you know, for someone that advocates for this stuff like I do, and you know, not to put myself on any kind of pedestal, because most all I do is tell this, you know, amplify. Not all I do, you know, I have some thoughts, but I'm amplifying a lot of people that do this work, but they don't have the time or the means to amplify themselves. Right? They're doing the work. Right? They're putting it out there. So, but I mean, they're doing the work. They don't have time to market themselves, you know. So I'm trying to be the journalist and the guy that tells those stories. But if I don't have a platform, you know, I have a limited platform. But you know, then how do I break through all the noise that we're talking about, right? So that becomes, you know, the catch-22, or you know, the problem upon the problem upon the problem, that we're fighting a world where, you know, everyone's all over the place. Reading comprehension, media comprehension is at an all-time low. Billions, probably billions, hundreds of millions of
Probably
dollars,
villain.
yeah, are being put into disinformation campaigns, or you know, keeping people so that you're not going to hear, you know, any kind of in between, uh, dialogue, and people were actively saying, "Oh, you actually have ways to solve these problems? I'm going to make sure that no one hears you." You know what I mean? Like, they don't want the problem solved. They want the chaos. They don't want, if I come and tell you that hip hop can solve racism, which is a wild and, you know, lofty claim, but I'm not the only one who says it. And I can give you some examples of how I think that it can actually, you know, greatly improve race relations or any kind of, you know, conflict. I can give you examples. I give you people that have done it throughout the world, in America, all over the world. There's people that do it. The Next Level program, Mark Katz, who's on my show and in my book, talks about how they can go and they use hip hop as a tool of conflict resolution. Hip hop comes from conflict resolution. It came from gangs truce, you know, and then now they're like, well, we're not going to battle each other with guns. We're going to battle each other. Like the whole mythological origins of this, it's in its core.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't help if people are actively trying to make sure that we don't all come together and form coalitions. I'm telling you that hip hop is the greatest coalition builder in existence. And so all of those things work very much against, you know, the work these folks are trying to do, my work in amplifying them. But I did say this, because I wrote the book. It came out just about a year ago. It's almost his birthday. And it's called Hip Hop Can Save America. The podcast has been around for a few years. Hip Hop Can Save America. And the book is intentionally titled, the subtitle, Inspiration for the Nation from a Culture of Innovation. It's not promising solutions. I don't have the solutions, Sway. You know what I mean? But we have inspiration, and this, and we can build off of that inspiration. But I joke, I was like, well, after the election, I was like, well, at least America still needs saving.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have anything to talk about if we fixed everything.
Yeah.
So at least there's that. But that's the work, man. And it is very much fighting against those forces. Somewhere in my, optimistic side, though, we do, I say the proponent of AI or social media, is that we can learn things and we can find things and we can reprogram our algorithms, in some ways. It happens. And I'll just give you the cutest example I can come up with. About a year and a half ago, my daughter and I were, well, first of all, she's a baby girl face, the world famous baby girl faces. She was 10 at the time, I think. And she comes to me one time, she's on TikTok, watching stuff. And I pay attention. I'm a parent, I do my thing. But I'm like, oh, but this, she's really into something. And I'm like, what is this? She goes, oh, it's about the tutors. And I'm like, the people that help you with homework? She's like, no, the tutors. Like, back in Europe, Marie Antoinette, and she starts going down this rabbit hole of, Henry VIII and the wives and all. And I'm like, say more, tell me more. And she she went down this rabbit hole. She found it fascinating. She's learning history to the extent that when we went to New York, back to New York, from New York, live in Atlanta now, we went out, I took her for a week to New York as tourists. We're just going to go up as tourists, right? We're going to go pretend we've never been here and we're going to do all the things. And I was like, let's go to Broadway. It's going to be your first Broadway show. I said, you pick it. I'm thinking I wanted to see the Alicia Keys one, Hell's Kitchen. Is it Hell's Kitchen?
I
Whatever.
forget the name of it.
Yeah. I wanted to see that. I thought I'm sure she'd like, you can't go wrong with Broadway. Whatever you see on Broadway is going to be amazing. And she picked this one called Six. And I'm like, what's this? She goes, it's a musical about the six wives of Henry VIII. They had made a whole musical out of it. And it's set to like pop music. And it's very like K-pop Demon Hunter, style of taking. And I was like, okay. And like, we went and it was great because everything on Broadway is great. And it's like Hamilton. Like, I don't want to like put Hamilton on too high of a pedestal either, but I'm telling you.
It's up there though.
Huh?
I said it's up there though.
Yeah. I mean, like you can learn so much. And one of my side projects was a podcast called Newsbeat, where we would take a social justice stories, stories of injustices. And we were interviewing the artists, the activists and some experts, and very often people who are facing injustice. And we had interviewed them. So it sounded like a regular podcast, like we didn't hear our voices. They told the story. It was like a documentary, like short documentaries, about 30 minutes each. And at 3 points during the episode, think of it as the end of Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, we had an independent hip hop artist who had written 3 16-bar verses for that episode. Specifically for that episode, just recapping what we just discussed, but doing it in the way that a hip hop artist does, real, compelling and with feeling and with cleverness and just poetry and force. That because to me, a hip hop artist is as good as being a journalist as a writer. Why wouldn't they be as good at it? It's fantastic work. It's a great podcast. We won several awards for it, even beating out. I don't know if you've heard the New York Times. Have you heard? This is a little small rag up in your area. We beat them for Journalism Podcast of the Year, a podcast with rappers in it. Like, you know what I mean? So all I'm saying is that all of these things exist. I don't know how I got that. Oh, because it's the technology. So you could say there's too many podcasts. I hope this is a good one. I have a good one. We want people to listen to our podcast, but it is oversaturated.
Except ours.
Right. But it is oversaturated. However, if you listen to Newsbeat, if you listen to whatever my daughter's TikTok rabbit hole was, you did learn something. And something that's going to stick with you for a long time. And now they're using our Newsbeat episodes in classes. And they're teaching with it. You know what I mean? Because it's a compelling way to get young people to listen to the news, right? Because it's rap and it's hip hop. So yes, problematic. Yes, maybe within there, is also a way to, get the message out in a way that, we wouldn't have been able to without it. So I think the idea, again, longer conversation, but I think the idea is we have to treat algorithms and social media the way mixtape artists did, just where they use the technology that exists, right? They were selling CDs at the record store and they were using or cassettes, right? The trunk. Yeah, 100%. It's how, hip hop propagated around the world, right? cassette mixtapes. Shouts to Summer McCoy, the Mixtape Museum. But they did it in a very disruptive, circumventing way. They used the technology that exists in a way that got them around the gatekeeping. And I don't think that we have had a concerted effort yet, because there's also no, big body of, hip hop advocacy, that's said we're going to channel some of these same kind of energies and disrupt the system in that kind of way. So that's also stuff I'm working on. So we'll see what
Gotcha.
happens.
Yeah.
But I think
And real
that's
quick,
yeah.
yeah, and real quick, shout out to me for back in the day, my mixtapes, and especially when I was my R&B tip, my Red Light Special
Yeah.
mixtapes and mix CDs.
There you
Y'all know
go.
who it is back in the day.
That's what's
I used
up.
to do those.
That's what's up.
Dave's Ed Podcast is now part of the Alive Podcast Network, the home of Black voices, where community, culture, and creatives live. Dave's Ed Podcast adds to the vast catalog of titles available on the Alive Podcast Network app on iOS and Android. Check out Dave's Ed Podcast and many others on the Alive Podcast Network app, the home of Black voices. So that's the end of the Q&A segment, and now I want to move to the segment, my favorite segment, I guess, called First Thoughts. Manny, First Thoughts is my opportunity to throw a word or a phrase at you to get your first thought. For those joining for the first time, like I always say, I'm happy you're here, but shame you haven't been here before, or something like that. I've been butchering that saying for like 8 episodes now. I don't even know what I say anymore.
It's a game of telephone with yourself.
Yeah, seriously. So yeah, first thoughts. Manny, obviously you're not privy to those first thoughts because we ruined the whole idea. First thoughts.
Fair.
Are you ready for some first thoughts?
I guess I have to be. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't even air it. Then I would waste all this time. So yeah, let's go.
All right. First thought is rhythm. What's your first thought?
Rhythm. Rhythm and blues, which was your line name. How much do I get into this? Do I go into
elaborate as much as you want to?
Oh yeah,
or as little.
Rhythm and blues, blues. So now I'm doing like the word association, right? Rhythm and blues, blues. It goes back to my dad, who was a blues and jazz connoisseur. And it was sort of my earliest entrance into music. Right? My dad would listen to blues. He's from Newark, New Jersey. Listened to he went to school with Joe Clark. He's right around that age. Passed away now. Sociologist. He was a college professor. Study of urban studies, sociology of minorities, as it was called then. So he's pretty woke, before that was a thing. Like I always joke, I knew what gentrification meant when I was 8 because I did. Yeah. Like it's, funny because it's true. So he was on top of it. Rhythm and blues. He was a blues guy. Some of my prized possessions are some of his records that, I inherited down the line. And one time we went to a concert together was B.B. King at Westbury Music Fair on Long Island. So when I think of rhythm, I think of blues. When I think of blues, I think of my dad.
It's very nice. I think I saw BB King once. I have to go back in the archives back here in my cobwebs.
Yeah,
I think I saw him once live. Pretty sure
it was him and oh my God, the guy who was at the end of Sinners.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, but Westbury Music Fair, because we lived there for a while, and that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool to see King.
All right. So next first thought, and think about hip hop here. Resilience. What's your first thought?
Wow. Resilient. When you look at hip hop as being a force of of rebellion, resilience to a degree, revolution. People argue about that, and that's fine. I love those arguments. I love hearing those perspectives. I don't come from the communities, obviously have faced all of these hardships. Hip hop both speaks to resilience and is resilience, right? It just exists that way. And the thing about resilience, and I know that, a lot of folks from oppressed communities were like, I wish we didn't have to be so damn resilient. Like we don't want to be resilient,
Yeah.
And so we look at it as a badge of honor. Sometimes we're like, y'all are so resilient, and it's like, I look at it more like I wait for the day that they don't have to be resilient. And again, I do think hip hop can solve, as I say, hip hop can address, alleviate, and in some cases eliminate a great many of societal ills that plague those communities. And so, that's part of the work.
Address, alleviate, and eliminate. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, last first thought.
I got words. I do words.
Yeah. And listen, I paid attention to the fact that the subtitle of your book is a rhyme.
That's
You know,
true. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I had to throw it in there.
uh, yeah. So before I get to the last first thought, I'm going to preface it with this. This is something that in the community we go at each other about. Artists go at each other about. And so that's where I came up with this idea because I remember just sitting on the steps back in the day talking about this as it relates to this artist or that artist or comparing artists and all this stuff. And so authenticity. What's your first thought?
Authentic. Two things. First thing, the literally first thing that comes to mind is real, recognize real. The second thing is again, I will be a broken record. And thankfully, I think people know what I mean when I say that. Sometimes I'm speaking to high schoolers. You can't be like, okay, a
Yeah.
record used to be, because everything does come back to hip hop. One of the things
Just say
about
no cap. They'll get it.
yeah. There you go. Yeah. Um, you have to say it like 6, 7 times.
Yeah.
The cipher, right? The idea of the cipher,
Mm,
right? The idea of the cipher, the circular gathering of dancers or rappers or thinkers, right? Or, speakers, just having a 360-degree knowledge exchange, right? According to the great Tony Blackman, she wrote a great book about this. She's a great artist herself, called The Wisdom of the Cipher. But Tony will talk about, that cipher as being sacred space, right? Where everyone's in it in an equal fashion, like we're all kind of equal, and you're only judged by how authentic you are to the culture that brought you there, right? You can go in and in the middle of the cipher and spit a verse that's all right. It's kind of half-assed. You're trying, but if you're trying, we know it, and we'll give you love for that. Come on back out, and now the next person goes. Same thing with dancers. Same thing. Same thing with just being there and not performing, not jumping in the center of the cipher, but holding the space like respectfully. And I said in my TEDx talk, I said, if you've come to the cipher, if you authentic, it's funny, you spend all this time memorizing the words, and then
hmm
as soon as you do them, I don't want to memorize them words ever again. But if you authentically respect the culture, then you're welcome in the cipher. That's hip hop, right? KRS-One talks about it. Says you're not judged by it. He says KRS-One in a lecture he did in the Netherlands, actually, which is on YouTube. You can watch it. He says, that whole thing where Martin Luther King, the great Dr. Reverend, said, we don't be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. And he says, that doesn't happen anywhere in the world. It doesn't happen in the United States
hmm
for sure. It doesn't happen anywhere. He says, except in hip hop. Because when you come into the cipher, you're judged on your skill and your authenticity, right? The
hmm
respect you have for the culture. And if you get out there and you rock, and then you're down with us. You're down with this thing. And that's how me, white dude from Long Island, can be in the culture. I can go to every country on the planet and find hip hop being respectfully, practiced, right? And you could tell when it's not. So being authentic in the hip hop sense means respecting the culture and being welcome in the cipher, but extend that to humanity. Just
hmm
respect, if you have respect for my background, my heritage, my religion, my thing, and you do it authentically, but it has to be a two-way street because no one in the cipher doesn't believe the same thing. And then you have a nice thing. And so that's why I look at hip hop as sort of the microcosm of, of great coming togethers of people, because it happens there. Listen, once you leave the cipher and you might be over here doing, I don't know, but in that moment,
yeah.
we're equal, we're respectful, we have these unwritten codes of, allegiance, and we're not there to play games. We're there to, to do what we do. And so, man, there's something in there, and
hmm
you know it when it's authentic, and you know it when it's not.
Yeah. No, I love that answer. And for those out there that don't understand what I'm about to say, there's a difference between a cipher and a battle, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
it might not be so much love and respect in the battle,
for
but there
sure,
is in the cipher.
for sure. Yep, yep.
All right. So, man, that's in the first thoughts. And what I started last season was what I call TO first thoughts, which is an opportunity for my guests to throw a first thought back at me to get my first thought reaction. So, if you had something you want to throw back at me, what would it be?
Hmm. Hip hop.
Hip hop to me is that look back into my childhood. It's a look back into the things I fell in love with, whether it's artists or movies. One of the things I used to do when I was a kid was, and this, I'm going back to foam headphones with the silver freaking strap that cut into your skin.
Yep.
I would just listen to music. right? Just walk around, listen. This is Walkman. I'm talking like you pop the tape in, you get to side A, done, flip it over to side B, and that's where I really started listening to hip hop. Now R&B, the jazz, all the old school stuff that came from my grandmother, came from mother, that type of stuff. But they didn't listen to hip hop. They didn't listen to rap, and that came from just sitting on the stoop and hanging on the corner and being a guy who didn't listen to hip hop to becoming a guy who made mixtapes in hip hop
Yeah,
and
I love it.
sitting at the parties carrying the crates and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I went the same.
Um,
Similar path.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
so to me, I'm not today. I'm not big hip hop head. Fully admit that. Like I said, R&B, jazz. I like to chill out. I like to go on drives. I do listen to my '90s hip hop. If I do listen to anything, it's '90s.
It's
It's
fair.
just sorry. That's my error.
It's fair.
Um,
I DJ. That's my wheelhouse. That's where I
yeah.
sit. Yeah, I get it.
Any party can get cranked up just off
Same.
'90s just by itself. So to me, it's a look into my childhood. It's that one of my pseudo favorite movies is called Ratatouille. I don't know if you've seen
Oh
it.
yeah, of course. I've seen it
Um,
1,000 times.
yeah, yeah.
I got kids, man.
It's one of those movies. I don't know. I don't even know how I turned it on one day, and it became
It's a
something
great
I turn
movie.
on. Anytime it's on, I turn it on.
It's a great movie.
But when the critic eats the ratatouille for the first time, and he gets that whole transformative thing back to his childhood. That's what hip hop does to me sometimes, especially when I listen to stuff that was in time period of me between like junior year high school, which is like '93, to like end of sophomore year at college, which is like '96, '97, like that '93 to
Mhm.
'97 time period for me. So that's what hip hop would be for me.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. I mean, there was a study done, and of course, everybody will say that the best era of music, whatever music they listened to, was that time period of their life. Obviously, we're listening to the most music, we're having the most fun, we're having the most new experiences, we're becoming adult. Like, we have so many memorable, and songs will take you back to those moments. And I get that. I get that. I know that that's what a lot of people, um, who, again, just going back to what we were saying earlier, who lament, like where hip hop is now. But
Hmm.
I also say that, I say two things. I say what sometimes we also really miss is the time, you know, being in those moments. And we can miss that being young. Like, I'm happy being my age, but we a time was being had, and that's
Yeah,
bringing us back to
yeah.
it. My good friend Silent Night, who's a great artist, he was actually one of the ones who was on Newsbeat as our artist in residence. But I DJ for him in the band, and we do things together. He's out of Jersey. He's not too far. He has a song called "Joy to You." And in the song, recently released a couple months ago, "Silent Night," like night, like the chess piece. You'll like
Hmm.
him if he's from the era, but super dope. But in the song, he basically says, why do we do things that don't bring joy to us? Sometimes we plod through life and there's certain things happening. He says, when did it stop being fun for you? When did it turn into a rut for you? You know what I mean? And makes us kind of like, look at some things that maybe we could do to cut out of our lives that maybe aren't giving us that, joy anymore. And which is a great song and a great message. The flip side to that is, let's think about bringing things back into our life that once gave us joy, that maybe
Hmm.
we don't do anymore of. Tony Blackman, when I interviewed her, she says there was someone who was trying to be a rapper for all these years, and then he like stopped. And she asked him like, why did you stop? Because this industry is stupid. This that I can't mess with what they're putting out, the mumble rap. Like, and she
Mm,
goes, well,
yeah.
she goes, did you start rapping to become Jay-Z? He's like, no. She goes, then why'd you stop rapping? Because you didn't. And I'm like, huh, yeah. So as a hip hop guy, and again, I rapped, I made beats, I produced, I had a home studio, I was a DJ. I don't like the music out today, but I do hip hop every day. I go
Mhm.
to conferences at the colleges where they're discussing hip hop like on this intellectual level, but also the college kids there. I go to Howard's every year. We're going to the Hip Hop Ed conference uh, on June 5th and June 6th in New York City. Come to those places. You might be asking me for my closing thoughts. This is my closing thoughts already. I'm just saying, like, come to these
That was
places.
next, but yeah.
Come to these places. And see. Yeah, it's not what it was, man. Nothing's gonna be like, oh man, the '90s. Let me tell you, I was getting into so much like fun trouble. Not good trouble, fun trouble. but
Yeah.
I see hip hop like now as a parent. I learned from these folks that are like, hey, I can help you understand your children better if you pay attention to the hip hop they listen to. Don't say like
Mhm.
it. You don't got to be vibing with them. You don't got to be doing the dances, but you'll understand them because you learn to understand how they look at the music that they listen to. And don't you want a better relationship with your children? and I'm like, oh yeah, I do, kind of like, right. So
Hmm.
that gives me joy. Being in these spaces, seeing college kids actually not mumble rapping, actually being, matter of fact, Howard just a bunch of students from Howard just did a whole protest against the speaker, the commencement speaker. I know it was the same kids. I know it was the same young people that were in the that come to the hip hop conference, because they're about that social justice life. And like to see that and say, oh, this is hip hop. It's still here. You know, come out, come. Do the things that gave you joy with hip hop. We're not gonna listen to it all the time. I know we're not going to do that, but find a podcast like Hip Hop Could Save America. Find a podcast like Dave's Head, where he talks to people, that do this kind of work, and come out to look at your local, events and just go out, man. Go out and see somebody. Go if you're in Atlanta, they got a thing called Soul Food Cipher where they just freestyle, and it's like free off top of the head for like and they do it once a month, and they've done it for 10 years. New York has a bunch of things. You can go to the Union Square subway station every Friday night from May to November from 8 p.m. to midnight, right upstairs outside the subway station. You'll find my friends Legendary Ciphers, and there's a circle of rappers, and they got a beat playing, and it's just freestyle cipher, and people will jump in, and people will jump in and watch, and people will jump in from other countries and just start rapping, and someone will come in with a violin and they'll jump in, and it goes on every Friday night from 8 p.m. to midnight in New York City, in the streets of New York City. That brings me joy, man. So yeah, I hear you. I know that hip hop gives us joy, and it gave us a lot. It still can, bro. That's my only closing thought.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I would say I was sitting there thinking, to your question, your question back to me, Kumo D. I was on a whole Kumo D vibe for like it seemed like a whole year straight.
Come on with it.
Just Wild Wild West
Yeah, for
and How
sure.
You Like Me Now and all that stuff. But it was one of those things like again, this is Walkman, so
Yeah.
you killing the tape.
You're
You're
killing it.
wearing out the tape.
I had the single.
A B
I had the
A B.
vinyl of Kumo D. Fun fact: remember, I said my dad was a college professor of sociology. He taught at SUNY Old Westbury, and Kumo D was one of his students.
Really?
Yep. Fun fact.
Huh.
Yep. Look at that. Full
6
circle
degree or
moment.
15 degrees separation, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Because it was like he was like, oh, there's a concert happening. I got to go to the school. Like he was doing like student affairs, so he had to go and like be there, chaperone or whatever. And I was like, oh, who's performing? He was like, some guy, cool Modi. It's one of my students. And I'm like, and I was like, probably
Like, seriously.
I'm like, can I go? Like, I couldn't go because you had to be part of the. I'm like, you can get me in. You're the guy. He couldn't understand for the life of him why I cared about like some student in his class that was going to be like rapping at the, And I was like, what are you doing? He didn't take me. I'm still mad at him now. But yeah, he's one of his students. Yep, that was pretty interesting. Fun fact. I mentioned it in the book. It was pretty cool because one of the teachers I talked to, she plays. I go to work, I think. No, that's Kane. Yeah, no, I go to work. Wait, no.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's cool older.
Yeah. I'm thinking I get the job done. I go to work. She goes, I play that when I'm having the students like get ready for their essays for something. So she used Kumo D in her class to this day. So still out there. Everything's still, you're not done yet. Hip hop ain't dead.
Gotcha. So usually I offer my guests an opportunity if they want to promote anything or any thoughts to give those. I don't know if you still want to do that, if you want to or not.
I rambled, but people want to. If anything I said like really sparks any interest, the best obviously hiphopcouldsaveamerica.com is my sort of hub for that. MannyFaces.com for me. But from hiphopcouldsaveamerica.com, you can get to the podcast, you can get to the YouTube channel. I do some essays, and all of the recent interviews in the last couple of years are on YouTube as well. And if the one thing I would ask you to do is perhaps go to the newsletter. There's a newsletter, there's a Substack newsletter, and I send out stuff like this all the time. I do list actually what I like to call dope interdisciplinary hip hop events across the country. So the academic conferences, sometimes like the regional break-in competition battles, just to remind people that still exists. So those listings are there. And I'm, humbly, I'm probably the only place that puts them together that consistently and that extensively. So the newsletter is a super valuable and super inspiring resource, and it's free for the most part. So
yeah, hey, listen, humble or not, facts are facts, right?
Yeah, I mean it's facts. It's I'm definitely the only one that does it. I'm just saying it nicely.
yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Well, Manny, thank you for this conversation, for broadening the lens for which people either they did or did not know about hip hop and hip hop culture. Um, at best, hip hop has always been about expression, innovation, resilience, and finding ways to turn struggle into creativity and support our community. I appreciate you sharing your perspective. And before I let you go, like I've said for the last season, I think season and a half with all my guests, may every today be the best day of your life.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate your time, and I really do. Like I said, I do this on the other side of the mic, and I know what it takes. And to even be invited here and share this sacred space with you is a pleasure, privilege, and an honor. So thank you, man.
Appreciate it. My favorite segment of my podcast is my grin, which stands for great reason to be in love with now. Now that we finally, and I do mean finally, I put the capital F with the F in finally, have gotten to the point where we're getting temperatures in the 90s. Thank bejesus. Thank everybody. I'm happy, right? I can go outside and the beautiful, bright, burning sun smacks me in the face and just warms my soul. And golf is a lot better too in warm weather. But when this episode drops, we're coming up on Memorial Day weekend. And just thinking about the state of economy in this country right now, how we're hopefully thinking about efforts to conserve money, right? Flights are ridiculous. Gas is ridiculous. I filled up $65 it cost me this past week, and I haven't seen $65 in years. Can't tell you how long it's been, but it's getting worse. At one point, I remember Saturday, I kind of looked, I think it was Saturday, Friday or Saturday this past week. And I looked back at the pump and I'm like, this thing is, and if you're aware of your car, you know how many gallons you can take from E. And I was on like smoker's cough E with my car. I needed to get to a gas station very fast. And I do that sometimes. And it's a really bad habit. Sidebar. It's a really bad habit of me sometimes where I know I'll need gas and I'll look at my GPS or I know where I'm going. I'm like, okay, well, it's only 14 miles to where I got to go. I'm sitting at 30 miles. I got plenty of gas to get there. I can fill up when I get close to my location or fill up on the way back. And then forgetting that I drive somewhat fast, which uses more gas. And in this case, I was heading to go golf and I got about 10 minutes away from the location and my gas meter goes, beep when it gets to 30 miles, inside of 30 miles of gas left. And then it beeps again when you get to like that smoker's cough amount of gas fumes in your tank. And the meter goes completely to zero, which means basically you got that, reserve tank that you're on right now. But if you're aware of your gas tank, you know that you have 13-gallon tank or 15-gallon tank or 27-gallon tank or whatever. And so I'm looking at the gas on the pump and I'm leaning back and I look at the thing and it's at like 8 gallons and I'm at like $45. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be expensive fill up. But yeah, it's been a while since that happened. But Memorial Day, I'm assuming is going to be on a budget for a lot of people. This go around. And meaningful holidays are less about how much money is spent, more about how you spend with anyway. In theory, right? I know there are some people who, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, Thanksgiving. It's got to be big, 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 big. Totally cool. Your money, not counting pockets. But not every holiday weekend really needs flights and hotels and expensive plans. Sometimes rest is the reward in itself. Sometimes it's okay to just slow down and recharge. And I can already hear people who know me, who listen and watch my podcast, their eyes are rolling halfway back in their head with me talking about slowing down and recharging. Sometimes it's good for the goose isn't good for the gander, or do the things I say, not what I do. Whatever saying you want to throw in that situation is probably accurate for me in that moment. But also community matters, right? Simple gatherings, conversations, shared meals often become what people remember most. What you do, for this case, Memorial Day, there are parades to celebrate our veterans and those that we've lost. And also, another sidebar, I think people sometimes need to go back and remember what each of these holidays are for, right? 4th of July is about independence for the country. Memorial Day is about those we've lost in our armed services, right? In history. Yes, it's turned into like a celebratory type of thing. You get together, barbecues, fireworks, blah, blah, blah. But Memorial Day is about remembering those we've lost. I think that gets lost a lot sometimes. Okay, back to my point. It's important, I think, to whether you spend money on things or don't, to create joy intentionally. Fun doesn't necessarily require extravagance or, jumbo, what are those things called? Jumping gyms or whatever. Block parties are kind of cool. I do miss those from my childhood. But creativity and intentionality can go a long way to creating memorable experiences at very little or no cost. You can simply get people together, have some chips and dips, some hot dogs and burgers, and watch baseball all day. I'm sure there'll be baseball games on Memorial Day. Or you can, if you have a pool, if you're fortunate enough to have a pool at your house, pool is free. Just want to remind you, a pool is free. You already paid for the water. You already paid for the house. So at this point, it's free. Have some people over, everybody bring a dish, jump in the pool. There you go. But remember, and I spoke about this a couple seconds ago, the meaning of Memorial Day is reflecting on service and sacrifice, not just entertainment. And there are many people under the sound of my voice or watching who have loved ones who have served, and thank them for their service. And thank you if you're listening, you're a member of armed services as well. But it's about those who we've lost either in action, post action. I think it's important to remember that once you are a veteran, you are a veteran through life and beyond life, right? And so Monday should have a moment that recognizes and remembers that as well. But what I want to give you is a list of 10 things I think that you can do that are no cost or low cost ways to enjoy Memorial Day weekend. I kind of mentioned this when I read it, but number one, host a backyard cookout or a potluck, right? Now, I will preface by saying this. You got to be specific in this day and age, right? You got to tell people what they can bring, what they can't bring, what they can cook, what they can't cook. You know who can cook and who can't cook. And listen, it's not a good time to experiment with the homie's new girlfriend or your sister's new boyfriend. And they're a great cook. Cool. When we come to your house, you can prepare whatever you like. Let's kind of stick with what we know. You do deviled eggs, cool. We don't want Jenny or Karen or Tamika or anybody just kind of let me do deviled eggs this time. Have you done them before? Has anybody tasted Tamika's or Karen's deviled eggs? Then because I'm not getting food poisoning from Memorial Day weekend. That's going to make for a bad rest of the week for me. So potluck's cool. People can bring stuff, and I want you also not to be afraid to not eat something if you don't want it. If it doesn't look right, like somebody bring potato salad, it just looks like weird. Nope. No, that's yeah. Thank you for bringing it. Yeah, no, I'm full. I had a bunch of other stuff, but thank you. Just saying. Number two, visit a local park or hiking trail. Now, I just stated we're in the 90s, so we got to be a little careful with that. We don't need anyone disappearing because they passed out in the remote trail somewhere. We don't find them for 3.5 weeks. But a park is a great opportunity, depending on the type of parks in your area. Some you need a permit to congregate as a people, and this could also be with just friends and family. Just go for a walk and take a picnic basket or a blanket or something like that and sit out and have a nice little meal for a week and enjoy listening to birds and feeling bugs. Hopefully, bring some off or something like that. A hiking trail can be cool too. It's something you can do early in the day before it gets too warm. You go, you get back, and then you can kind of just relax for the rest of the day, and it's kind of cool, right? Number three, attend a free community parade or event. This is something I talked about before. Now, I won't be able to do that because I actually have a wedding I'm going to Memorial Day weekend, but we are volunteering somewhere Memorial Day morning as well. So I'll actually miss the parade that I normally walk in every year. I've done it, I think, 3 or 4 times. It's actually a pretty cool parade in the south of where I'm at that I drive down and participate in, but I won't be able to do it this year. But it's one of those things too. I haven't done the sitting and watching a parade go by thing. I don't think since I was a kid. Like I said, I've walked in parades, but I haven't been like the person who's sat in a beach chair or on the stoop if it's a parade that goes by your house. But I haven't been that person in long, long time. I remember way back the New Year's Eve Mummers Parade in Philadelphia, us sitting in a McDonald's booth up against the glass and just watching the parade go by. Now, I will say this: in my older years, where I'm at now, to me that was a little lack of experience. Right, you didn't get to experience the cold weather and the parade going by. It's New Year's Day, right? So it's not 90 degrees. But I think part of the experience of the Mummers Parade is being out there in the elements with the mummers and having a good old time. But I was a kid, and so probably my mother didn't really care for the cold weather like that. Number four, I have a movie marathon at home. Now, this is kind of a cool idea too, because I like sitting around binge watching different things on Netflix, or um, I guess it was last year or the year before I got hip to John Wick. My fiance put me on to John Wick. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. I still have not seen, back to back to back to back. But that's a kind of cool thing today to do as well. Maybe if you have a significant other, you're in a house, you kind of prep something that you guys can eat throughout the day, a little small, maybe grill something just for y'all too, or whatever, and you sit there and just binge watch movies all day. Now it's not like Die Hard binge watching because that would be kind of cool, but I'm sure there's things you could put on Netflix, watch a whole series or something like that. If you're like me, watching Netflix series that was really, really bad, reality TV shows, like, or Are You the One and that type of stuff. Yeah, I watch those. I do. Um, but that's a kind of cool idea too. You don't have to worry about baking in the sun if that's not your thing. You don't have to worry about inviting people over and cleaning up and then going to work the next day. Just, cook something for the house and sit around and watch stuff. Number five, organize a game night with friends or family. Now, depending on your house dynamics and your home and family dynamics, this is kind of a really cool idea, I think. Especially if you do this on like a Saturday night and you still got Memorial Day to do whatever you want to do, because it is a whole weekend. And so you get friends and family together. Maybe you haven't seen them in a while, and you all come together. Play some cards. Maybe if you got outside spot, fire pit, that type of stuff, kind of cool. And then everybody goes home and they take leftovers. Because one thing I started doing years ago, whenever you have something, containers available, take whatever you want. Because guess what? We're not eating all this stuff. So take whatever you want. But a game night is kind of cool too. Number six, visit a local museum offering holiday discounts or free admission. It's an opportunity to go to a museum that you may not be able to go to normal times during the week, whatever. Or maybe you just don't feel like paying the $37 or whatever it is normally, and they're offering discounted or free. It's a great opportunity to cash in on that one. Number seven, now you got to remember though, let me step back to number six real quick. If you're going to a museum, unless it's free parking, you got to factor in parking into that as well. And of course, gas, depending on how far you got to go to this museum, because gas ain't cheap these days. So, number seven, spend the day at a public beach or lake. If you have a nice beach or a nice lake, pretty cool thing to do. You get to go out there, get your suntan on, hop in a hopefully clean water. If you have kids, of course, kids will love this stuff. So spending a day at a public beach or lake is also pretty economic because you're not worried about grilling a bunch of food. You can bring a basket with you, or if you maybe want to budget going to the boardwalk or something like that and getting a meal for yourself or yourself and your spouse or yourself and your family, then it's could be more economical than having a big old barbecue at the house type of thing. Pretty sure it will be. Number eight, grill at home instead of dining out. Again, this is a more intimate thing and it's kind of in parts of the other ones that have come before this. But yeah, just grill at home. Grab you some chicken or burgers or hot dogs or whatever, ribs, ribs. Um, and just do a little small intimate grill at home. Now, I don't know how to do small intimate grills, even if it's by myself. When I used to grill by myself, I'm grilling like 30 pieces of chicken like I'm inviting the whole family over. But yeah, just grill at home, chill, kick your feet up. No worries in the world. Number nine, which I think is kind of cool and is one of my favorites, volunteer at a community or veterans event. And I already stated that my fiance and I are doing exactly that Memorial Day morning. But it's a good way for you to get up, get moving, get around, go see some veterans, maybe brighten their day a little bit as well. They may have memories of comrades and friends past who are no longer here, and so it might not be necessarily a positive holiday for them. And so, volunteering in a community event or doing something that you can give back to the community is always, always going to be something that's highly regarded in my book. So volunteering, absolutely. Number 10, I think goes without saying, and I hope that's possible for all of you, but disconnect from work and spend intentional time resting. Now, it kind of conflicts a little bit with doing the whole barbecue thing or cookout or hiking or volunteering and all this stuff. But if you do this, right, disconnect from work, spend intentional time resting, you can find yourself maybe throwing something on the grill for yourself, kicking your feet up, binge watching something. It involves a bunch of these things that we talked about already. I think it's the most important that no matter what you do of the other 9 things we talked about, that disconnecting from work or organizational responsibilities and spending some time that day intentionally resting is completely appropriate. And I hope that you 100% partake in at least number 10. So that's 10 things that you can do. No cost, low cost ways to enjoy Memorial Day weekend, backyard cookout or potluck, visit a local park or hiking trail, attend a free community parade or an event, have a movie marathon at home, organize a game night with friends and family, visit a local museum, spend a day at a public beach or lake, grill at home, here at a community or veterans event, and most importantly, disconnecting from work and spending intentional time resting. I want to thank Many Faces for stepping into Dave's head and having a really great conversation about hip hop, um, the misconceptions, the way that hip hop, can change the world and impact the world positively, the way it already has done that. The many hip hop artists and history and stuff that we talked about. Check out his website, www.manyfaces.com, on Instagram at manyfacesofficial, and his newsletter that he talked about as well, hiphopcansaveamerica.com/newsletter. Lastly, check out his book, manyfaces.com/book. Thanks again to Manny Faces. We talked about him possibly coming back and doing a part 2, and we're going to just dive into it. Now, we might dive into some R&B a little bit. I'm going to test him a little bit on some R&B maybe next time when he comes back. But I do appreciate the conversation we had. Very, very robust and intellectual conversation about hip hop, and I hope you enjoyed it. Hip hop to me is, I talked about Cool Mo D, um, but hip hop to me was one of those things where I had a whole phase when I was growing up where I was heavily entrenched in hip hop. And like I said, we used to do things on a stoop, on a corner, um, just driving around. Not gonna say who was driving because it might have been a little illegal, but driving around, just listening to banger after banger, especially the mixtapes that were coming out, the underground stuff that was coming out. And so, as I've gotten older, I've kind of shifted away from hip hop, although I still listen to it, especially in the gym. Gotten away from hip hop, shifted more to R&B, especially through college and post college and all that stuff. Um, but hip hop always has a special place in my heart. I don't watch the award shows like I used to, and I think that's indicative of how hip hop has changed, and I've become a little more, or I should say, less interested in some of the things that are going on in hip hop now. And I still fall back and listen. I sound old as these grays on my beard. I sound old when I say, listen, I like the 90s and classic hip hop and that type of stuff. But there's great artists everywhere. And there's artists like Manny said that you never heard of or you haven't heard of enough. And so hopefully, like I said, if we bring them back for part 2, I think it'll be a great conversation. We'll probably dive into some of that stuff, especially, those who aren't seen enough because they don't have that public spotlight shine on them. So again, thanks to Many Faces for stepping into Dave's head. Lastly, what I've done for a while now is give you a quote at the end of the episode. And I want to give you a quote from Will Durant. A great civilization is not conquered from without until it has been destroyed itself from within. In case I misspoke that a little bit, a great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself from within. Now, way back in the beginning of this episode, I kind of touched on some of the stuff going on with MAGA, and I kind of gave a little bit of a time to talk through the MAGA influence and the grifting and all that stuff. But it all relates, right? All this erosion of the need for facts, verification, I talked about with Dr. Brian, I believe her name was. All these things that erode trust in not only organization, but trust in what's actually valid and true and facts and foundational for what we should be operating with, not only individually, but as a government, as a country. All these things are helping to destroy and erode us from within. The longer this goes on, where very, very, very simple facts, very, very, very simple rights, very, very, very simple justice, right? The longer this goes on with these things don't matter to people, right? It's feelings over facts, right? The longer this goes on, the closer we become to destroying ourselves from within. Now, I hate to say it, there are people who are even talking about the word civil war, right? Throwing that out there. There are people just doing I firmly believe a lot of this stuff that's happening in the media and talking points that are being put out there just to kind of test people, just to test to see if the word civil war will trigger someone this way or trigger someone that way. People are very, very calculating in what they say and what they do. And so, as a quote says, great civilizations, which I believe we are, right? It's the only one I know. It's the one on earth. But fine tuning the conversation to just the United States of America, the longer this erosion of intellectual, right, integrity, say that again, the longer this erosion of intellectual integrity goes on, the closer we become to the snowball effect that eventually will destroy intellectual integrity, period. Facts, logic, reason. All these words I've thrown out there this episode, they won't matter anymore. And so what then? I don't like you, you die. I don't like you, you're gone. I want more power, wipe out these people. And I firmly believe that's what we're facing. That we're facing this battle to not destroy ourselves from within. And if you think that there aren't influences around the world, if you think there aren't bad actors around the world who are just waiting for the opportunity to pounce after we self-destroy or self-cripple, you're not very keen on what's going on. There are people who would love for us to beat each other up. Not physically, but think about, in football terms, right? There's a one division that has a bunch of good teams, but they all play each other, so they beat each other up. By the time they get to the playoffs, they're all worn down, beat down, injured, exhausted. And so some middle of the road, middle of the pack or middle of the road team comes along and just kind of catches fire and just starts beating all of them, not because they were better, but because the better teams are just beat up and just battered and bruised. They can't really take much from anyone, let alone themselves. But that's what we have to prevent. This erosion of intellectual integrity. I firmly believe that. So thank you for stepping into Dave's Head. Until next time, make sure you get your daily dose of perspective and always be the tone setter in your life. That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. If you enjoyed this episode, I'm sure you'll love similar content in the Alive Podcast Network app. Plus, you can support this podcast and enjoy ad-free listening to nearly 100 other Black-hosted podcasts. Download the iOS or Android app, become a member, and experience unlimited access to Black-hosted content week after week. Follow, like, and or subscribe to this podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and or X at Dave's Head Pod, and on YouTube at Dave's Head Podcast. For more information and links to all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Episode premiere on the second and fourth Fridays of the month. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, enjoy life because life should be fun. Take care.